Right now, in North Texas, there are homes you could buy for less than the price of a used car, some listed under $20,000. Not ruins, actual houses with roofs, walls, and yards, and almost nobody wants them. That sounds like a mistake. It isn't. These are real towns, with real streets, real courthouses, and real history. Towns that were once full of life and are now quietly emptying out, one family at a time. We're counting down 10 North Texas towns where the homes are shockingly cheap, and where the reason why is the real story. Subscribe, and let's begin. Number 10. Goree, Knox County. We start in Knox County, in a little town called Goree, a name most Texans have never heard. And that's the point. Goree was built on one thing: cotton. When the railroads pushed through this part of North Texas in the early 1900s, cotton was king, and towns like Goree sprang up to serve the farmers hauling their crop to the gin. For decades it worked. Goree had businesses, a school, and hundreds of people living their whole lives within a few blocks. Then the story that repeats across this entire list began. Machines replaced people. A single farmer with modern equipment could now work the land that once needed dozens of hands. The jobs dried up, and when the jobs go, the young people leave. For Wichita Falls, for Dallas, for anywhere with a future. Look at the numbers, and you can watch it happen in slow motion. Goree had over 500 residents in 1980. By 2000, it had dropped to around 320. By the 2020 census, it was down to just 120 census. It was down to just 158 people. In 40 years, the town lost roughly 2/3 of itself. Today, Goree still technically exists. There are still homes standing. And in a market like this, some of the cheapest properties in the region sit right here, well under what a home costs almost anywhere else in Texas. But cheap doesn't mean wanted. Here's the hard truth about Goree. There's no hospital, few jobs, and not much reason for a newcomer to arrive. The homes are affordable because the demand disappeared with the cotton economy. Goree isn't a ghost town. It's something quieter and sadder. A town that's still breathing, just barely, waiting to see who's left when the counting stops. Number 9. Estillene, Hall County. Next, we head into the Texas Panhandle, to Hall County, and a town so small it once became nationally famous for the strangest reason. Estillene has a population of about 121 people. That's not a typo. 121. You could fit the entire town into a single school bus route, and yet for years, drivers all across America knew its name, because Estillene earned a reputation as one of the most notorious speed traps in the country. A tiny town with a highway running through it, and a police presence that made a very big impression on anyone who touched the gas pedal. But behind that quirky fame is the same familiar decline. Estillene was once a railroad town. When a branch line was built here in the 1920s, the town had real momentum. Then the Great Depression hit, agriculture struggled, and the population began sliding downward, dropping to around 600 by 1940 and never recovering. Decade after decade, more people left than arrived. Today, what's left is a skeleton of a town, a handful of homes, a few remaining structures, and a whole lot of open panhandle sky. Property here is about as cheap as it gets in Texas, because with 121 residents, there is simply almost no market at all. And this is the pattern you'll see over and over. These towns aren't cheap because of some hidden bargain waiting to be discovered. They're cheap because the demand vanished decades ago and never came back. Estilene's claim to fame was making drivers slow down as they passed through. The irony is that the town itself never stopped shrinking. It just kept getting smaller, quietly, while everyone drove on by. Number 8. Chillicothe, Hardeman County. Now to Hardeman County, and a town with a name that sounds bigger than it is, Chillicothe. Chillicothe sits along a major route in North Texas, and like so many towns here, it was born from farming and the railroad. In its prime, this was a real community. Back in 1950, more than 1,400 people lived here. It had the businesses and the bustle you'd expect from a working farm town on the rise. Then came the long, slow slide. By 1980, the population had fallen to just over 1,000. By 2000, it was under 800, and by the 2020 census, Chillicothe was down to about 549 people, with recent estimates showing it's still dropping, at nearly 2% a year. Think about what that means. Every single year, this town gets a little emptier, a little quieter. A few more homes go dark, and homes here now list for a fraction of what you'd pay in booming Texas cities, some of the most affordable properties you'll find anywhere in the state. The cause is the same equation we keep running into. Mechanized agriculture wiped out the jobs. The highway carried the traffic past rather than into town, and the young people followed the opportunities somewhere else. Quick pause. If you're finding these forgotten towns as fascinating as I am, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. This channel digs into the places the rest of the country stopped paying attention to, and there's a new one every week. Okay, back to it. Chillicothe still has its streets, its homes, and its people who refuse to leave. But it's a town watching itself fade in real time. Cheap not because it's a secret, but because the world moved on. Number 7. Munday, Knox County. Back to Knox County, to a town that once had a title it was proud of, Munday, which called itself part of the vegetable capital of the region. That nickname tells you everything about what Munday used to be. This was a farming powerhouse. Cotton, wheat, and vegetables grown in the rich North Texas soil, hauled in from the surrounding fields, processed and shipped out. Munday had a busy main street, thriving businesses, and the kind of small-town energy that comes from a working economy. People had reasons to come here, to shop here, to stay here. Walk that main street today, and the story is written on the storefronts. Empty windows, faded signs, buildings that once held busy shops, now sitting quiet. The town is still functioning. It has a school, a few businesses, people who call it home. But it's a shadow of the bustling hub it once was. The population has steadily declined for decades, following the exact same path as its neighbors. When farming stopped needing workers, the workers stopped staying. And once a town loses enough people, it loses the businesses that served them, which pushes even more people to leave. It's a spiral that's very hard to reverse. That's why homes in Munday are so affordable. When there aren't enough buyers, prices fall, and they keep falling until they hit numbers that make outsiders do a double take. Here's the thing about Munday, though. It's not dead. There's still a community here, still people fighting to keep it alive, but affordable is really just a polite word for nobody's moving in. The vegetables built this town. When the industry changed, the town had nothing left to replace it with. Number 6. Turkey, Hall County. Now back to Hall County, to a town with maybe the most charming name on this list, and a genuinely famous connection most people don't know, Turkey, Texas. Turkey is the hometown of Bob Wills, the legendary king of Western swing, one of the most influential figures in American country music history. For a tiny panhandle town, that's an enormous claim to fame. Every year, Turkey still hosts a celebration in his honor, and for one weekend the town fills up with visitors, music, and life, a glimpse of what it might have felt like in its prime. But for the other 51 weekends of the year, Turkey looks like exactly what it is, a fading farm town on the dry panhandle plains. Like Estillene and Memphis nearby, Turkey rode the wave of early 1900s agriculture and railroad growth, then rode the long decline all the way down. Hall County as a whole has lost the vast majority of its population since its peak, dropping from over 10,000 residents in mid-century to a fraction of that today. Turkey's own population now sits in the low hundreds, and the homes reflect it. You can find property here for prices that would seem impossible in the rest of Texas, because there are far more houses than there are people who want them. And that's the bittersweet heart of Turkey. It gave the world one of its greatest musicians. It has a name people smile at. It has genuine history and charm. But charm and history don't create jobs, and they don't stop young people from leaving for the city. So Turkey keeps playing the same quiet tune every other town on this list knows by heart, the slow song of a place gently emptying out. Number 5. Electra, Wichita County. Now, for a town whose decline came from something totally different. Not cotton, but oil. Welcome to Electra. In Wichita County, the self-proclaimed pump jack capital of Texas. Electra's story is dramatic. In the early 1900s, oil was discovered here, and the town exploded almost overnight. It went from a few hundred people to around 5,000 within months. Oil money built schools, churches, businesses, and a real sense of pride. For a while, Electra was a boomtown in every sense, loud, fast, and full of people chasing fortune out of the ground. But oil booms have a cruel pattern. They peak, and then they fade. As the easy oil played out and the industry changed, the reason for all those people to be there slowly evaporated. The population that had rocketed up began drifting down. By the 2020 census, Electra was home to about 2,292 people, down from nearly 2,800 just a decade earlier, and a shadow of its 5,000-strong peak. If you're enjoying this, take 1 second and subscribe. It genuinely helps us keep telling the stories of these forgotten Texas towns, and it's completely free. All right, let's keep going. Today, Electra still proudly calls itself the Pump Jack capital, and you can still see those iconic pumps dotting the landscape. But the homes tell the quieter truth. Property here is remarkably cheap by Texas standards, because the boom that built the town is long over. Electra is a perfect example of how these towns die differently but end up in the same place. Some lost their farms, some lost their railroads, some lost their oil. Electra had its fortune pumped out of the ground, and when the ground gave up, so did the growth. Number 4. Memphis, Hall County. We return one last time to Hall County, but now to its county seat, the town that's supposed to be the anchor of the whole county, Memphis, Texas. Being a county seat is meant to protect a town. It's where the government operates, where records are kept, where official business gets done. It gives a town a reason to exist even when other industries fade. And Memphis was, for a long time, a genuine regional center, a cotton town so productive that Hall County once had thousands of residents and a booming farm economy that filled Memphis with commerce and life. But here's the sobering part. Being a county seat only slows the decline. It doesn't stop it. Hall County peaked with more than 10,000 people and has been shrinking for generations, down to a small fraction of that today. And Memphis, the county seat, has shrunk right along with it. Drive into Memphis now, and you'll see the bones of a much bigger town. Wide streets built for traffic that no longer comes. Storefronts sized for crowds that have thinned out. A courthouse still standing at the center of a community that keeps getting smaller around it. That's why homes in Memphis can be found at prices that seem unreal, because there just aren't enough people who need them. When a county loses most of its population over several decades, the housing supply ends up wildly outnumbering the demand. Memphis isn't gone. It still governs its county. It still has schools, businesses, and stubborn residents who love it. But it's a county seat built for a Texas that doesn't exist anymore. A big town wrapped around a small and still shrinking population. Number 3. Quanah, Hardeman County. Now to a town with one of the most powerful names in all of Texas, Quanah, the county seat of Hardeman County. The name isn't random. The town is named after Quanah Parker, the last great chief of the Comanche, a genuinely towering figure in the history of the American West. That heritage gives Quanah a weight and identity that most small towns can only dream of. This land was Comanche territory, and the town carries that legacy in its very name. Quanah grew into a real community in the late 1800s and early 1900s, powered by the railroad and the surrounding farm and ranch economy. At its height around 1950, it had nearly 4,600 residents, a thriving county seat with businesses, industry, and momentum. It looked like a town with a future. Then the same force that hollowed out every town on this list arrived: mechanization. As farming and ranching needed fewer and fewer workers, the population began its long retreat. From that 1950 peak, Quanah slid down decade after decade, and today it's home to just a fraction of what it once was, with homes listing across a startlingly low range that would shock buyers in any Texas city. There's a haunting detail in Hardeman County, too. Nearby once stood a small community built around Medicine Mound, sacred Comanche hills used for centuries as a spiritual place. That settlement is now essentially empty. The sacred land remains. The town around it dissolved. Quanah still stands, still governs, still honors the great chief whose name it carries. But its story is the same as the rest. A proud past, a thinning present, and cheap homes that are cheap for one blunt reason: the people left. Number 2. Vernon, Wilbarger County. Our number 2 is a bit different, and that's exactly why it belongs here. Meet Vernon, the county seat of Wilbarger County, and one of the larger towns on this list, which makes its slow bleed all the more telling. Vernon isn't a tiny hamlet of a few hundred people. It's a genuine regional hub, the kind of town with a real main street, a hospital, schools, and enough services to anchor the surrounding rural area. Founded around 1880, Vernon grew quickly on the strength of the railroad and the cattle and farming country all around it. Within a decade, it had 2,000 residents and real momentum, and it went on to become the beating heart of Wilbarger County. So why is Vernon on a list of emptying towns? Because even the bigger rural centers aren't immune. The whole region has been losing people for decades, And when the surrounding small towns and farms shrink, the hub that served them shrinks too. Vernon has held on far better than the tiny towns around it, but holding on is not the same as growing. And here's the part that matters for buyers. Because the broader area has declined, Vernon offers something almost unheard of in Texas, a full-service town with a hospital and amenities, where homes are still remarkably affordable compared to the big metros. That actually makes Vernon one of the more realistic options for someone who genuinely wants rural life without total isolation. It has the services the tiny towns lack. But make no mistake, Vernon is on this list because the direction is the same as everywhere else. The pull toward the big cities is relentless, and even a strong regional hub can only resist it for so long. Number 1. Crowell, Ford County. And now, number 1. A town that didn't collapse in a crisis, but disappeared in slow motion over nearly a century. Crowell, the county seat of Ford County. Ford County is one of the least populated counties in all of Texas, and Crowell is its quiet, stubborn heart. To understand what happened here, you have to look at the long arc. Back in 1930, Ford County was home to more than 6,000 people. It was an agricultural county. Cotton, cattle, the standard economy of North Texas. And it was genuinely full. Then the decline began, and it never stopped. Watch the numbers fall, decade by decade, over 6,000 in 1930, dropping through the 5,000s, the 4,000s, the 3,000s, the 2,000s, all the way down to roughly 1,000 people today. That's a population collapse of around 80%, and it didn't happen in one dramatic event. It happened the way these things always do, one family at a time, one graduating class that never came back, one funeral not balanced by a birth. There was no single villain, no mine closed overnight, no factory left in a single year. Just machines replacing farm labor, and young people leaving for cities with jobs and hospitals. The same slow story that emptied every town on this list, playing out over 90 years. Today, homes in the Crowell area list across a strikingly low range. Not because they're distressed bargains, but because that's simply the honest market price for a town that most people are leaving rather than joining. Crowell still has its courthouse, its school, its zip code, and its people who stay. That's a special kind of stubborn. But it stands as the clearest example on this list of a town that lost most of itself. Patiently, permanently, and almost silently. So who actually buys a home for under $20,000 in a town like these? A few people do. Retirees who want land, not location. Remote workers who chose space over rent. Investors betting that rural North Texas has finally hit its floor. Maybe they're right. The land is real, the prices are real, and the long drive to the nearest hospital is real too. These homes are cheap because the story behind them is heavy, not because there's a secret bargain nobody noticed. If this fascinated you, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, would you ever move to one of these towns? Watch the video on screen next. See you there.